It's been a long 4 weeks. I mean, to be honest, when I first started this, I didn't think that I was going to get this far into the project. For me, it was all about trying to just discover whether or not I loved the Elder Scrolls series or just loved Skyrim. And it turned out that along the way, I ended up playing what would quickly become one of my favorite games of all time, Morrowind. As we close into Oblivion, we have one more video after this one, obviously, with Skyrim. I just started thinking to myself whether or not this entire project is something that I've put the most amount of passion into, because I've been releasing a video every single week because I've been completing, or quote unquote completing, each of the games throughout the week. But then I realized that there are times in future videos where I can talk about things if I forgot about them, because I have been doing online playthroughs. You'll be happy to know, since the Arena and Daggerfall videos, that I've beaten both of the game's main story quest lines, and I've gone back in a couple of times to try some other stuff and do some other exploring. I don't really have anything new to say on those or on Morrowind at the moment, but do know that my experimentation with playing each of the games doesn't stop with these videos. Just because these videos come out doesn't mean I don't put more time into them afterwards, and doesn't mean that I won't have more to say maybe in the future. This will not be the last time I talk about Elder Scrolls. Even after the Skyrim video, you can probably expect quite a few more. Not only do I have 3 more games to look over, that being Redguard, Battlespire, and ESO, but there's also just so much more that I could do when it comes to talking about the Elder Scrolls series. It's just such a massive series, and even each game can take hours upon hours upon hours to talk about. So no matter what happens in this video, because I know that there's going to be some people who don't like the conclusion of this video, and that's fine. You're allowed to disagree with me. I just want you guys to understand that this is not the last that I'm going to talk about Oblivion. This is just about my first experiences with the game and how I see it as of writing. Could this change in the future? Perhaps, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't. With all that being said, hi, my name is Kaiser, and on this channel I do video game reviews, rants, and retrospectives, and if that's something that interests you, then please click that subscribe button down below, as I'm trying to make it to 10,000 by the end of the year. A quick thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. If you want to find out how to become one of those, then stick around to the end of the video. I'll talk about it at that point. And thank you so much for joining us on our Elder Scrolls journey. Without further ado, let's get into Oblivion, and see if I can make it to the end of this video without referencing Hazbin Hotel. Chapter 1, The First Character. This playthrough was originally going to follow the same character creation as the rest, a female Khajiit stealth assassin type. I had wanted this to be the case for a few reasons, to keep consistency among each of the games being the main one. In a series where the amount of character builds are vast, yes, even in Skyrim, no matter what people try and tell you, it's important when writing comparisons to keep things straightforward, and since I wanted to try and get those videos out in timely manners, the biggest part was being stuck to the status quo. Darrow Draw III, the granddaughter of the Eternal Champion and daughter of the leader of the Morag Tong, came to Cyrodiil to investigate words of the Dark Brotherhood taking back its rise to power after the Night Mother of Morrowind had been slain by Darrow Draw II's hand. After getting caught crossing the border illegally into Cyrodiil, she was shipped off to the Imperial waiting trial. Darrow Draw would soon find herself with a free escape blessed by Mephala, as the Emperor and his foolish family was being hunted down by some group she didn't recognize. After making her way out of the sewers, she headed back into the Imperial City to attempt to get intel on the Dark Brotherhood. Apparently around these parts, a separate thieves guild run by someone named the Grey Fox was abound. She would worry about them later. For now, she needed something to get the Dark Brotherhood's attention. Eventually, she heard rumors of the Mehrunes razor resurfacing in a ruin some ways away. This would be perfect. With the Mehrunes razor, surely she would be contacted by the Brotherhood, and then she could see what was going on. At this point, some of you are thinking or commenting, or whatever the case may be, Kaiser, that's not how you get into the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion. And yes, I know that. But Darrow Draw didn't know that. I'm telling this story this way for a reason that I'll cover in a bit. So anyway, back to the story. After a couple of days running through ruins and taking down some foolish mercenaries and vampires, Darrow Draw successfully got her hands on the razor, but it came with a terrible price. Darrow Draw had contracted vampirism, and she needed to cure it. After traveling to the Mages Guild, she learns a count over in Skingrad wishes to find cure as well. The count tells her she must find a witch in a cabin by a river. She finds the witch, and then the witch states she will only provide the cure for 5 grand soul gems. After breaking all of her lockpicks, Darrow Draw has 2 of them and needs to find a way to get the rest. One day, she is chased from her bed into the daylight, where she perishes, and Darrow Draw's line is ended. Now, I chose to end Darrowdraw's story that way because, and I'm going to be reasonable about this, 5 fucking grand soul gems are impossible to come by without joining the Mages Guild and destroying the integrity of the character. On top of that, I was unable to fully travel, as if I fast traveled to a location and the daylight happened to be out, my character would instantly die. This was my first brush with vampirism in the series up to this point, not counting Skyrim of course, and speaking of Skyrim, it has the opposite problem. In Skyrim, vampirism is the equivalent of a stubbed toe that grants you the powers of Superman. In other words, it's a small risk for a large reward. In Oblivion, being a vampire is all risk for basically no reward, and curing it required a lot of energy that, to be honest, I was enjoying at first. The idea that all my foreplanning for the character got shifted by the interruption of something unexpected is one of the more fun parts of Dungeons & Dragons and the Elder Scrolls. I love watching my characters grow from their experiences and become different people than I had originally planned. However, it eventually got tiring watching Darrowdraw die over and over and over again because I spent just a second too long in the sun, or waited just an in-game hour too long. Vampirism is too much of a hindrance. I wasn't able to get invested with my character, kept dying over and over again, which is something I'll talk more on later, but that being said, we retired Darrowdraw, so for the rest of the review, say hello to Shreen, the Red Guard's sellsword. Jailed after he accidentally killed a man during a tavern brawl, he rolled his eyes at the Emperor's talks of divines and their plans. When the Amulet of Kings was given to him, he ignored the call and left to go find work far away from the Imperial City. After a week or so, he went up to help investigate a temple of Dibella worshippers getting slaughtered. Off to find some ancient armor some religious temple would no doubt buy for hefty coin, Shreen eventually discovered he was the reincarnation of Pelennor Whitesnake, the Elf Slayer, and it was his job to slay Umiel the Unfeathered as he had returned. After rebuilding the Knights of the Nine and slaying Umiel, Shreen had come to respect the divines, so off he went to deliver the Amulet of Kings and help save the world from the armies of Oblivion. We'll finish his story later in the video, but the entire point of me telling you all this is to discuss the storytelling aspects of the Elder Scrolls as a whole. You see, what separates the big three, that being Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, from every other RPG I know, is the ability to let the player tell their own story. Other RPGs have named protagonists with a clear goal in mind. Finish the main plot, side quest your balls off to finish the main plot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love things like The Witcher, the Tales series, Kingdom Hearts, and more. Hell, my favorite video game of all time, Legend of Dragoon, is the exact same way. But there's something special about making a character, coming up with a backstory, and then letting the story unfold of them living in the world. This is the reason that I didn't go directly to the Dark Brotherhood the way that I knew it was supposed to be earlier with Darrowdraw. This is why I did what she believed would be the best course of action. Bethesda does a fantastic job throughout the Howard era of the Elder Scrolls of making the world be a lived-in real place you can send your character off into and live their own life. It's always so fun to see what new adventures, avenues, and pathways my characters will take. If you don't metagame and you just let your character live and discover things on their own, you can live an entire alternate life, fulfill tons of adventures and stories, and never once touch the main questline or even other faction questlines. It's amazing, and I want it known that despite the criticisms I'm about to hurl at Oblivion from a canon, it is no different in this regard, and I still love it for that, if nothing else. Chapter 2! I've got a wet noodle, and I'm not afraid to use it. Before my journey into Oblivion, the discussions around its god-awful leveling system was something that I had heard before. It wasn't until I watched the Patrician video, however, that I realized how utterly obnoxious the whole thing is. Without getting too deep into it, the leveling system in Oblivion basically makes it feel like you never truly progress, even though you are increasing your stats, attributes, and more. It will always feel bad, and I didn't truly understand that part until I played this game. Every combat encounter felt like I was in a fucking pillow fight, and my opponents were wielding sledgehammers. Slapping my opponent, taking off small micro bits of health while every hit they did, felt like a fucking 18-wheeler. I would discover, much later in the playthrough, that my fancy DLC armor was actually utter dog shit. But the biggest part was the difficulty slider. When I play games with difficulty options, I always go medium. I like a little challenge, but I'm not a fucking Dark Souls YouTuber here. I want to enjoy myself. As it turns out, it's actually quite common for Oblivion players to lower the difficulty down because spamming the left click and watching your character flail their arm around like they saw a goddamn spider on it until the absolute bag of health in front of you dies isn't a very fun time. But sending the difficulty slider too far down will kill things too quickly, and then you don't level up as often, and then the idea of your character growing and progressing is just gone entirely. Say what you want about Skyrim's bare-bone leveling system removing attributes from the series, but at the very least, I felt stronger and better as time went on. In Oblivion, you start off killing rats and goblins in a sewer, and by the end of it, you are fighting goblins and rats reskinned. That is to say, the difficulty of enemies only changes with the slider, but not the level. Level scaling in this game is a nightmare, and it made every combat encounter feel awful. At one point, I just turned my brain off and started autopiloting, slamming my mouse button mindlessly and staring dead-eyed into the distance, occasionally backing away to spam the beginning healing spell. Combat is awful, and it won't be the first thing that I have great disdain for. Chapter 3. Where am I? Who are you people? I feel like by the end of the series, I will have talked about fast travel more than I actually talk about the Elder Scrolls. In my Morrowind video, I said that I actually kind of liked the way the game handled travel if it weren't for the lack of mountain fucking cliff racers! So instead of just adding a mount, Oblivion removes all fast travel options. You just basic directly into the game. I like the way fast travel was handled in Skyrim. You still had to explore the map as you couldn't fast travel anywhere you hadn't been yet. If you did want to travel to a place you haven't been, you could hire a carriage, with later DLCs adding carriages to custom houses, so you had a pretty solid option to travel around the world without just abusing the built-in click on location mechanic. In Oblivion, however, from the first time you step blinking into the light, you are free to fast travel anywhere you damn well please. Now, I know some people will be like, well, if you don't like fast travel, don't use it. And I didn't for the first few hours. But eventually I got bored and annoyed because the wilderness in Oblivion is, well, it's fucking dull. Look at the screen right now. I'm not even sure what I'm going to put here, but I want you to look at the screen and tell me where in Oblivion I am. You have 1 second. Time's up. The answer is who the fuck knows, because all of it looks the bloody same. In Morrowind, every area was distinct. Every part of the wilderness felt alive and unique. There were creatures and locations and places of intrigue. In Skyrim, you can tell where you are at a glance because each hold has an identity of its own. From the plains of Whiterun to the harsh mountains of the Pale, it's easy to tell where you are at any given time. Oblivion's map is gigantic, but it's all the same boring forest countryside copy-pasted about 500 times, and there are long stretches of things with nothing in them. People often complain about the overabundance of dungeons and locations in Skyrim, but honestly, I don't see why. Oblivion feels so empty, and this isn't helped by the fact that the reason its map is so large is because the game was designed around fast traveling. If there was more stuff to do, more to keep my attention on the road, I wouldn't have minded as much. But after a few hours of seeing absolutely fuck all and the same goddamn forest texture, I just got a haze over my eyes and decided fuck it, might as well, because that's what happens when you design your game around fast traveling. I don't mind fast travel as a concept. I don't like it as much as I used to, especially after I've been playing Morrowind as much as I have, but I don't mind as long as it's done well, and it just isn't here. Oblivion's world feels empty and soulless, and I'll be honest with you, this is one of the major complaints I have about the game. Remember what I said, the strength of the Elder Scrolls is to give you a world that feels lived in, alive, and vast, and lets you build your own story within it. And while Oblivion still does that, there are a lot within towns that do that. The wilderness does not, and it doesn't seem like a lot at first, but it really weighs the whole experience down as I get attacked for the 30th time by like one wolf and maybe a couple bandits on my way to whatever my objective is, and it's taken me almost 20 to 30 minutes to walk to that objective. Out of everything mentioned in this section, the boring environment is the one that hurts me the most. Each city and town is unique in its own right, holding different layouts, statues, and environmental storytelling to let you know what kind of place you've been in. Dungeons can get samey and boring at times, but that's the Elder Scrolls. At the end of the day, they're still well-designed dungeons, probably not as well-designed as Morrowind, but it's very hard to find anything that's as well-designed as fucking Morrowind. Saying Elder Scrolls dungeons are mid and alright is like saying you shouldn't kick puppies. It's not the most revolutionary sentence in the world, but you need to have some sort of follow-up and substance. But it's the samey forest rolling hills in the world that just puts me to fucking sleep, and I can't understand it. Skyrim in lore has always been described as snowy and cold, but that didn't stop them from providing varying environments throughout the province. Hell, even if we go off lore, Cyrodiil's supposed to be thick, luscious forests, not rolling hills of medieval Europe. I think that the world design suffers heavily from Bethesda attempting to fall back on generic fantasy tropes, and I'm not sure why. Morrowind's landscapes were alien and foreign and interesting, and having you take place in the very imperial province of Cyrodiil, the capital of the Empire, should have been a way for Bethesda to build us an even more interesting world. You don't have to have 40 different types of environments like Skyrim did, but at the very least there needed to be something that made the world feel like it was an actual real world that I was traversing in. And I didn't even get to experience the absolute mind fuckery that would be running into something like a minotaur in the forest. And that's another thing. There's just a distinct lack of wildlife. The most you'll fight is wolves, bandits, and imps for the first few hours, with a couple of rats popping out here and there. But where are the lions? Where are the bears? The tigers? Oh my, because I know somebody wants to hear that fucking joke for the 400th time in their lifespan. Where is all of the different wildlife that you can interact with, and why is it all locked behind some arbitrary level scaling? That's the thing that irritates me the most. Everything in this world had the opportunity to be so much more alive. You know what I miss from Morrowind? The dinosaurs. Where the fuck are those? In terms of exploration, like I said, there isn't much except in towns. There you will find plenty of NPCs. Every single one of them you can interact with on even small levels, and most of the time you'll stumble upon quite a few quests and backstories, and it's a fun side distraction for sure and helps flesh the world out a little bit. What's annoying is getting from town to town has to do with fast traveling, which makes the world feel even smaller the more and more you go on. And I don't know how many more times I can repeat myself, so we'll just move on to Chapter 4. Chapter 4! What am I even doing here? So now that we've covered some of the more frustrating aspects of this game, let's get back to Shreen's story. After the Knights of the Nine, which by the way was an incredibly fun story to play through, I decided that for the first time ever, I would complete the main story of an Elder Scrolls game early on without playing everything else. However, this would turn out to be a mistake, and Shreen's story would go unfinished as of writing this review being written. I actually wrote that. I'm supposed to be a fucking professional. When I go back for my offline playthroughs, I'll more than likely take the time to finish the main quest line, but as of now, well, here's the thing. As a streamer, I have to be on the ball at all times during a live stream. I can't let myself get bored of a game and check out and begin autopiloting through the game, because at the end of the day, I'm there to entertain my chat. These reviews are written from the perspective of someone who's not only playing the game, but also who is also streaming them. And the reason for that is I need content to be a streamer, and what better way than to knock out two birds with one stone? But you have to understand that when a game starts to get really, really boring and I start to feel myself phase out, this is something that I notice a lot more often when I am a streamer, because I'm always conscious about whether or not I'm being entertaining in the moment. And so these moments where I start to just check out become far more apparent than they would on an average playthrough. The common practice of people viewing streamers as entitled lazy children who press one button and then make a living playing video games, no doubt brought about by idiots like Asmongold who can't even clean his own fucking room, is false. Content creation is hard. It's a difficult mental strain that has a lot you don't see go on behind the scenes. For streamers in particular, you need to be entertaining. Nobody tunes in just to watch you play video games. They are here to watch you play video games, if that makes sense. The game certainly matters to some regard. When I quit Dead by Daylight, my numbers plummeted, but it wasn't Dead by Daylight that was carrying my content. If I was just another silent killer main staring blankly at the screen, not doing or saying anything of substance, my previous following wouldn't have been built up. People might have come to see Dead by Daylight, but they stayed for the way I, in particular, played Dead by Daylight. And that was the fact that I was engaged, talked, joked, discussed, and commentated. In order for a game to be good for a streamer, it needs to engage them. Even if a game is bad, the streamer still has material. They still have something to react to and talk about. A boring game is worse in this regard than a bad game, and you might see where I'm going here. Oblivion's main questline starts off interesting. Deliver the amulet, close a gate, rescue Martin, but after only a few quests, it gets really boring. The point at which I began to grow bored was when I was sent into Bruma to kill a spy. Upon arriving back to the temple, after the spy was dead, I was sent back to find the other spy that was mentioned in the letter. Now, my big brain said, hey, that person's probably hiding out in the basement in the caverns of the other spy's house. So I went there and I searched and I searched and I couldn't find them. So I was looking all over the place, and then I was like, this is getting really frustrating. So let me check this out. And then I went and started talking to people, and eventually I found a beggar and I talked to him, and he was like, hey, that spy's actually in that other house. And I was like, what? I was already there. And then I Googled it and I found out that the reason is because you're supposed to talk to him first to get the other person to spawn. But then the other person didn't even spawn because this is Bethesda and they can't make a game without game breaking bugs. Sorry. The point is that the game wants you to use your brain. It tries to give you opportunities to use your brain, but you're not rewarded for doing so. Let's take an earlier part of the quest for a moment, right? Just take a small detour. You're supposed to go out and get copies of the Mythic Dawn commentaries so you can find out how to get in touch with Mankar Cameron. Now, the solution in that is to look at the first letter of each paragraph in all 4 books, and then it will tell you what you're supposed to do. Or you just talk to the Argonian mage lady once, then talk to her again, and then you'll straight up get an objective marker of where to go. And the objective marker won't happen until you talk to that lady twice. This is the kind of shit I'm talking about. Why are you taking agency away from me, Bethesda? After I get both of these spies dead, I am sent by Martin to get a Daedric artifact. The only one available in my level, or I assume the only one because it's the one of the game sent me to do, was Azura's Star. After getting the star, I went back and then Martin told me to go talk to Joffrey, and then Joffrey told me we had to close another gate. No. I don't want to do that. Is this entire series just going to be us fucking around while we figure out how to get to Mankar? Because the truth of the matter is that the gates are boring. They're really fucking boring. I did one of them and I never want to do another Oblivion gate again. Because it was literally just walk in, go to the end, grab Sigil Stone, gates closed. And that's just not, in my opinion, like, why isn't there like a boss you have to beat at the end of every gate? You know, you fight your way through Daedra and then you get to the end and maybe there's some special lieutenant of Mehrunes Dagon, right? Because that's who we're fighting, right? That's who's coming back, right? We all know this by now. Why isn't there like a lieutenant or a general you have to fight? Why doesn't each gate have different types of Daedra, depending on where in the world the gate spawns? Because I'll be completely honest with you, I know enough about this game from just watching analysis videos and reviews and playthroughs and stuff like that to know for a fact that every single gate is the exact goddamn same. And that is just boring design. That is really boring design. And I wouldn't mind if every gate was the same layout, but like I said, there needs to be more intrigue, more storytelling, more inventive ways to build these gates, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be in a realm of Oblivion. We're supposed to be in Mehrunes' realm. And you know, you want to go with the whole fire and brimstone demon cell thing that was popular in 2006? Go for it. I'm not mad about that. I'm just saying that if my eyes glaze over at the opportunity to do yet another gate, maybe, just maybe, it's a little not enough. And it was at this point that I asked my chat if I really wanted to do it. The story quest just started to drag. It's like someone at Bethesda heard pace your story out and thought that meant drag out every encounter in step. The quests weren't unrelated by any means. They were just boring. And to be honest, that probably has more to do with the premise than it does the actual quest. I loathe even, world-ending plot points. I hated it in Skyrim as well. That's why it took me literal years before I went and did the main quest in the game. World-ending apocalypse's plots are overdone, but more than that, they're almost always very badly told. That's why Supernatural got boring after the 5th one. Why Buffy the Vampire Slayer had an entire episode dedicated to the ridiculousness of the notion that there's some world-ending event that needs to be prevented every year or so. It's a horribly outdated story thread, and it's something I wish games and stories overall would stop doing. From the moment the Emperor is killed, there's a sense of urgency, way more than the other two games, by the way. Certainly way more than Skyrim, which is crazy to me that people think Skyrim's main questline funnels you from the beginning. What sounds more urgent in your opinion? Hey, if you have time, my family is in a village down the road. Stop by. I'd love to, host you or something. Or, hurry, hurry, right now, take my amulet, find my bastard son, stop hell from overrunning us. I showed you a vision, you saw the vision. Hurry up, run, no! The game, from its very cinematic opening, forces the player into a choice. Ignore divine callings, or go to fight the forces of hell. Don't get me wrong, I, unlike some critics I know, can suspend my disbelief pretty fucking well to readily ignore main quest lines in these games. However, the point I'm trying to make is the devs from the beginning wrote quests that requires your immediate attention, then was forced to slow themselves down so that you don't finish the main quest in a couple of hours, and it led to awfully dull quests within the quest line. I don't want to have to close another fucking Oblivion gate or fuss about with spies. I want to chase down main car Cameron and kick his ass for running away from me like a pussy when I came to get the amulet back the first time. The way I would have done it wouldn't have been to have us be the one to deliver the amulet. Instead, I would have let the Emperor give the amulet to Boris, and we overhear through a grate or something out of sight what is happening. What if instead of the Emperor going, I've seen your face. You're the one in my dreams. What if instead we just took the opportunity to go free, and we just went free? The Blades don't care about us. The Emperor doesn't care about us. There are assassins after his ass. So it would have been far more engaging if the player would have witnessed the murder of the Emperor and then witnessed what was happening with the Amulet of Kings and heard where Boris was going. Because then for the player, there's not divine intervention being shoved on them. Instead, it's up to the player to decide if whether or not they want to deal with that bullshit. If your player is a heroic paladin of the gods, then maybe yes, he will go and take care of that. But if your character's a thief assassin, they don't give a fuck about divine intervention or what might be the end of the world. It could be all bullshit anyway. If your character is a mage, then maybe they go and they take the time to get their mage's prowess up before they go and see if they can figure out what that Amulet of Kings things was all about. Then it would actually be a lot better if instead of walking up to Joffrey and being like, hey, king died, he gave me the amulet, here you go. And Joffrey going, whew, well, I guess I believe you now. Maybe then there could be some sort of test. Then when we go to retrieve Martin or rescue Martin, instead of him instantly trusting that we're some champion of the Emperor and he's the Emperor's son, we could have some things that he wants us to do to earn his trust. And then it could feel like an actual fucking story that we weren't shoved into from the very get-go so that you wouldn't slow down the pacing to a fucking crawl and I wouldn't get bored. I stopped playing Oblivion because I got bored and uninterested. There felt like nothing left for me to engage with, and that's partially my fault. I could have gone out of my way to do other things and leveled up a lot more and experienced more of what the game had to offer on screen, and I will do that. But for now, the world as it is feels a tad empty when you aren't in towns, and that's a big problem, and the story doesn't feel like it's worth pursuing, the main story that is. I stopped playing Shreen's story because, much like whenever Darrow the second story concluded with her becoming leader of the Morag Tong, I felt like I had seen enough. Chapter 5. The Good and the Bad. Over the course of playing Oblivion, I've found that it does a lot of bounding back and forth between good and bad. For every truly awful decision, like the lockpicking minigame or the weapon degradation being truly obnoxious, there are cool fun things like the speech minigame. Actually, talking about the speech minigame for a moment, I've heard a lot of people say how much they hate it, but I don't know about that one. In my opinion, it truly makes me feel like a silver-tongued charlatan, gauging people's body language and working your way through a conversation to get them to like you as much as possible is something I wish more games and speech systems did. In fact, that's the entire point of having a high speech skill, that your character could do this, that you can do this. Do you think that people in real life who are really good at convincing you of things or really good at getting you to like them are like, they have a magical power that influences your thoughts? No, it's because they know how to talk to people. They know how to mingle. They know how to read what you're doing and what you're thinking. Maybe it could use some improvements, like making the body language more subtle or not forcing us to use every piece on the wheel. I'd even enjoy seeing something like the responses they like and dislike dislike changing as the conversation goes on. Maybe that's a bit too dynamic, but even with this base version, it's still a lot better than Morrowind's confusing admire, intimidate, taunt system, where no matter how high my personality was, every single option always seemed to lower disposition, or Skyrim's complete lack of a proper speech system to begin with. I enjoyed the speech minigame greatly even. It's actually one of my favorite things to do when I'm playing offline. Just walk around and max out every NPC's disposition. It's just a fun thing to do. But again, even with this really fun system, you have its lock-picking minigame, which appears to be based on luck. Apparently, there's a sound cue that's very subtle, but the issue with that is I'm hard of hearing. I can't hear subtle differences, and I'm willing to bet most people can't, as one of the most common questions on the Oblivion subreddit is how the fucking hell you're supposed to even do the lock-picking minigame. Honestly, I got to a point where I just started spamming auto attempts because it was far easier than fighting with whatever bullshit it was. Back to good. I like the variety of spells and status effects. You can actually get away with playing a character who debuffs your opponent in meaningful ways, doing things like burden to slow them down, drain their attributes, and more. It's actually quite cool, and it makes magic as something other than more damage on enemy, less damage on me, which is problems Skyrim suffers from. In Morrowind, there was obviously more choice, with Mark/Recall and Levitate, two spells that need to make a reappearance in the series. Taking them out was lazy, Bethesda, and you know it. Back to the bad. Weapon degradation is so bad here. In Morrowind, it was a minor inconvenience that I felt I didn't need to be there. In Oblivion, you'll find yourself with magical gear pretty fucking fast, and you can't repair magical gear yourself unless you reach a certain level of armorer, but the only way to level up armorer is repairing or training. So if you don't reach that level before you're decked from head to toe in magical gear, you are forced to go to the smith every time you leave a dungeon and finish a quest to top everything off. This slows the pacing down and becomes a hindrance in adventuring, especially because this usually means you need to fast travel, once again reducing the size and scope of the world down to a few select towns with a loading screen in between. This is some of the things that I'm talking about. You see, for every good thing about Oblivion, I can find multiple equal bad things. In both Skyrim and Morrowind, the good heavily outweighs the bad when it comes to mechanics, systems, and design. All this to say, Chapter 6, Conclusion. I find it fitting Oblivion is in the middle of the Howard era of the Elder Scrolls, because it's the most mid of the three. It's like an awkward transitionary period between Morrowind and Skyrim, providing an equal number of good and bad systems that make gameplay enjoyable, yet bland. It's not a bad game, far from it. Even with its nonsense, I still hold Oblivion far above many other RPGs I've played. And like I said in the beginning, the identity of being able to build a character and play out their life story is still here. It's still an Elder Scrolls game, and by that merit alone, it's still good, but when compared to its far superior brothers, it's a game that leaves a lot to be desired. I'm going to keep playing Oblivion. I still have much to experience with the game has to offer, and right now I'm playing some sort of hand-to-hand Argonian mage who uses alteration and illusion magic in my offline time, and I'm really enjoying it, especially when I have reruns of Has-Been Hotel on the second monitor. Don't take my criticisms as hatred for the finished product. Take them as reasons why Morrowind and Skyrim beat it out in my game rotations. And speaking of Skyrim, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I think I know what's coming in the comments section, but I hope we can all just keep it civil. I understand that this is probably not what some people want to hear about Oblivion, and I also understand that there's going to be people who are like, you need to play the game more before you review it, but trust me, I understand that, you know, we'll get to that later on. But again, thank you guys so much. I can't wait to do the Skyrim video. I have an interesting idea about how to approach it a tad bit differently than I normally do. But before we get out of here, I do want to give another special thank you to my channel members, Nuclear Bomb, Cat Lover, Peter RJ, and Spirit Upgrades for their additional support. If you want to become a channel member and help support the channel, then please click that join button down below so you can get perks like seeing videos early and discount codes and much, much more. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.